I think we already have, in the sense that our budget continuously extends the solvency, Medicare, Social Security. These are critical programs that this president has not only pledged to protect, but has continuously provided proposals to do so. Now look, I mean, one way to do this is to continue to pursue his fair taxation agenda. Not a dime of higher taxes under 400,000 AGI, but he has a robust agenda to enforce fair taxation. Part of that, by the way, is blocking people from millionaires and billionaires from evading taxes by making sure that the IRS is adequately funded. And what have the Republicans done? They've actively worked against that funding, tried to cut it, and in fact have extracted reductions there in some of these budget deals. That's basically a shadow tax cut for tax evaders, and that's not okay for wealthy tax evaders, and that's not okay with this president.
At some point, though, the retirement age is going to have to be lifted, Jared, isn't it? We're living longer. It's just a different world now.
Look, Social Security is such an essentially important program for our seniors, and it is one of the most effective, efficient programs we have. We're going to continue to protect it, to bolster it, and to make sure it is there for generations to come.
Maybe you'll end up in a Trump ad as well, Jared. I wonder. On this CPI day, how are you feeling? I'm looking at the headlines here. U.S. inflation accelerates, tempering case for Fed to cut rates. U.S. inflation picks up as goods prices halt months-long decline. I could keep going here. Is the moral of the story that this matter of inflation, the trajectory, does not in fact move in a straight line? Because we were talking about Goldilocks a couple of weeks ago. Jared, how do we decipher this one?
Yeah, that's exactly the right way to tee that up. Any month can bump one way or the other. And I know, Joe, I've emphasized this in our discussions. We at the Council of Economic Advisors make a point out of never overemphasizing a particular month. And in fact, by the way, if you look at the pace of a headline CPI inflation over the past 3 months annualized, it's still 1.8%. And that's because the last 3 months were 0.1.3. So do the math, and you get that kind of underlying trend remains the friend of those who want to see inflation continue to come down. You mentioned goods prices. I think the unsnarling supply chains is very much baked in the cake, and we saw goods prices continue to be very low. So look, I mean, core inflation, very important to the Fed. Core inflation, of course, hit expectations. 0.3 was expected, 0.3 was delivered. So we see that prices continuing to ease, job market remaining strong, and the combination of those two is delivering real wage gains, which we also learned about this morning. And that's a trend, not a blip. We've seen real wages up about 1% over the past year, and they've been rising now for a while. Very important to our working families.
Well, we've talked before as well, Jared, about the last mile, that it's in fact, it's that last 10 pounds that are so hard to lose here. Are we going into the most difficult part of this inflation battle?
I mean, I think we'll have to see. I certainly understand those arguments. I mean, one question there is there more room to run on the economy supply side? Can we continue to improve supply chains, and can we continue to see labor supply increase, especially among prime age workers? And I think the answer to both of those is yes. So I'm not ready to sign up for this last mile argument, though it's something we're of course going to be keeping a close eye on.
Okay. That's fascinating. Do you worry about the impact of what's going on the Red Sea? Jared, you've referred to supply chains and goods prices here, and we're looking at these massive tankers going all the way around Africa because of this security threat at the moment. Is that going to reach consumers at some point?
Again, this is something that, whether it's our national security, our economic team, monitoring extremely closely. Operation Prosperity, as you know, is a coalition effort in effect to help escort ships and keep commerce going in the region. Now, I think the important thing there is to just cut right to the punchline and look at the impact on gas prices, at least thus far. It's been a very limited impact. I woke up this morning and the national gas price was $3.08 a gallon. It was below $3 in 30 states across the land. And remember, in June of 22, that price peaked at north of $5 a gallon. So that's been very welcome to American consumers at the pump. It's also helping to keep consumer spending strong, and that's been at the core of our recovery. So limited impact thus far, but very much, of course, on the watch list.
Spending time with Jared Bernstein, chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors, here on Bloomberg. I'm sure you're dialed in on this potential for a tax deal on Capitol Hill, Jared. I'm kind of amazed that we're even having this conversation right now when we're not even sure if we can fund the government or, dealing with the border or so many other issues that we could talk about. But apparently we are on the verge of a deal between the Democratic-led Senate and the Republican-led House that would restore the enhanced child tax credit in exchange for more friendly business taxes. I wonder if the White House is in favor of this, if you have a sense of the contours of what the economic impact of that might look like.
Well, I think it's a really important practice not to for the White House to comment until the president goes first when it comes to ongoing negotiations. So I'm not going to give you a White House readout. What I will say is that President Biden has consistently supported a child tax credit expansion, much like the one he put in place in the rescue plan. Now, he's talked about the importance of paying for that. And again, that takes us back to a tax agenda that injects a significant fairness into the code, particularly for those at the top of the scale and particularly for those who want to evade taxes by giving the IRS the resources it needs. But look, the child tax credit reduced child poverty in half, and then it expired, and child poverty went way back up. It is one of the greatest investments we can make in this nation to have as low a child poverty rate as possible. And what we learned from earlier versions of that debate, the numbers I just cited, is that the child poverty rate is a policy decision. And our decision is to try to keep that as low as possible, and that certainly connects to a robust CTC.
Well, there was a lot of concern about the expiration, of course, the child tax credit. We talked a lot about as well the expansion of COVID-era funding for child care programs, the child care cliff, they called it. We went over that cliff, Jared, and I wonder if the landing has not been as hard, forgive me if I'm using the wrong expression here, as some had feared.
Well, maybe I would probably hone the expression a little in the following way. Just the way that was constructed, it was more of a phase down than a cliff. But look, the bottom line is still relevant. We really want to make sure that anyone who wants to join this labor market and work the desired number of hours and weeks they want ought to be able to do so. And especially for caretakers who are, of course, disproportionately women, that means adequate access to affordable child care. I would call this, in fact, President Biden would call this one of our more important pieces of unfinished business as we go forward. Again, we have robust proposals in our budget, fully paid for, to expand access to affordable child care. And it's not just an important micro issue for people at the kitchen table, which is what this president cares so much about. It's also helpful to the macro economy by boosting labor supply.
Well, this is remarkably happening at the same time, as I mentioned. We talk about government funding. Next Friday would be the beginning of a shutdown if this doesn't work out. And I know that Speaker Johnson is under immense pressure from his right flank in the House to not do a continuing resolution. Jared, I'm just wondering if you see the odds of a shutdown rising and what economic impact that would have.
I think it's really hard to put odds on these things, but I think the people who watch it closely took those odds pretty far down when it looked like there was, if not an agreement, a proposal from Speaker Johnson on the top lines for the appropriation bills. Let me put it this way. Again, these are ongoing negotiations that I don't want to lean into from this particular podium. But what I will say is this. You and I have just had a good, robust discussion of all the things that are going right in the U.S. economy. Low unemployment, inflation easing, real wage gains, actual cost reductions in key areas of consumer spending, whether it's gas, milk, bread, eggs, airfares, TVs, and so on. The idea that we would want to kick the ball in our own goal with an unnecessary government shutdown when I think majorities on both sides want to avoid that is absolutely counterindicated right now. So I just am urging anyone who is in that in those negotiations to avoid that possibility.